Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today for FlowForma customers, Process Health Check webinar. I'm Niamh Lorden, Head of Marketing here at FlowForma, and I'm delighted that you're able to join us today. Before we get started, I would just like to share some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. If you need any assistance during the webinar, just email info@flowforma.com for assistance. Your lines are muted. I encourage you to type any questions that you have into the chat facility on the right-hand side, and we'll leave us some time at the end of the webinar for those questions. After the webinar, I will share a recording of this content, and a small feedback survey will pop up. So I'd really appreciate if you could let us know your feedback on the webinar then. So today I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues, Shay O'Connor and Paul Stone. So Shay O'Connor is our Head of Solutions here, and Paul is our Product Strategist. So guys, I'm delighted to have you with us today.
Thanks, Niamh.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, so we have a half-hour session here today, guys. And I know Shay and Paul have lots of best practice tips for process excellence, success, and process analysis. So there's a lot to cover. So guys, what I'll do is I'll hand over to you guys now.
So, welcome everybody. And we just thought it was a good time for everyone to take a peek at their processes and get some best practice tips that we have come across. Over the last couple of years, there's been a few standout things that have made a significant difference to how people use their processes, how they perform, just the optimization of the whole thing. Some of these are quite simple, and in a moment we'll also take a peek at how we work with the data that comes from the processes as well. But just from a best practice point of view, myself and Paul just felt there was a few areas that needed to be addressed. So here we just have a few pointers, but in regards to steps, for example, some of our clients would have started off with, say, processes that grow exponentially, where you might have, you could have 15 to 20 steps in a process, where in reality, when we got a look at it, the ability was there to not only scale it down, but also to separate some of the processes into sub-processes, because they were separate entities in their own right. So it was very important not to overload it. Now, the thing about it is, what customers would have felt like was that, hey, I just build upon what I have already, instead of saying, right, okay, this process has become quite large. So what we're going to do is break it down into 2 or 3 processes that talk to each other. The thing with something like that is it's always good then to ask us best practice on how to do that. But it does work out way better. And it means that those separate processes then, because they're self-contained, can be also edited and updated. Repeating tables is another area that people like to use because they were used to subforms and used to using Excel sheets. So we would find a lot of people who use Excel sheets love looking at repeating tables. The problem is with repeating tables is that you have to load up all the data, and you have to pass back all the data. It's reading and writing all the time. Whereas when you take a look at your process, sometimes it's unnecessary to actually load the whole table of contents in a repeating table. You're better looking at it from a filtering point of view, as in make the selections on the form, and then your repeating table that populates while you're on the form is a subset of the original list. So, and what other people used to like to do is they used to like to increase or pull in all information and then filter, which is not good practice in itself. Paul, you've particular interest in the data area of things, and we're quite keen that people took a focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of data, there's a few things to say. One is that our system obviously stores data in SharePoint, everybody knows that, but it also has the ability to speak to external databases. So you can store your reference information, let's say, in an external SQL database and import the information directly from there. You'll also find there's quite a speed improvement with that. as well as
Yeah.
that, all the data that you do capture in your processes, it's all stored. So you have all the performance metrics and so on, and might as well use that to make your processes more efficient. And I know Shay is going to talk about that now in a little while.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the great advantages of FlowForma is that it does manipulate data and make best use of that data as you can. And also make use of varied data stores to ensure that you're retrieving and pushing and pulling information in the fastest possible way.
Yeah, so a database is, I think, crucial. That if you, especially if you're using a lot of data, try and get connected to a database as soon as you can. Really, reporting. We have an advanced reporting facility which utilizes the feed of the data from your environment straight into a SQL Server database. This is really good because what it does is, on an hourly basis, it'll pass the information into that SQL database, so that you may have created dashboards, you may have created different reports, etc., that could be sitting in the likes of Power BI, for example. But in the background, if you're pulling from a SQL Server database, this advanced reporting feature that we have will keep that up to date on an hourly basis. No need to push and pull. And if you've been using the OData feed, I mean, OData feed is the standard utility within for use of integration with data. But with the larger numbers you would get as you move along in time for reporting, you're better off having something that's automated in the background that's pushing data to a database. Now, another sort of small thing, and again, it's another thing that, Paul, you are very keen on, is the whole area of test and learn.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, FlowForma, one of its biggest advantages is that you can get rough solutions in front of people and get feedback. And it's so important for so many reasons. People see obviously the speed of delivery being a thing, the ease of change being a thing, but you're getting a solution in front of the end users. So you're setting their expectations early. And that's so critical to success ultimately. Get that rough solution out in front of them, so that basically those end users, the people who are actually going to be executing the processes in the real world, can see what's coming and can feed back suggestions for improvements, so that they're more involved. There's more feeling of ownership of the end user community. And at the end of the day, then when they get the system into production, it'll be meeting their expectations, because their expectations will have aligned with what you're delivering. So test and learn is so important. Get something rough, get something quickly together, a rough template, if you like, of your process, and get it out there to those end users and act on their feedback.
So
That's
apart from the buy-in that you get from that, you're also better off having an environment, a separate test environment, so that you can try out things. So having a separate, like not making changes based to a production process. So if you're in the middle of a nice solid production process, you may want to have another environment there, another site that has things you've been trying out. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always better to have a separate production separate development, let's say, or UAT style environment,
Yeah.
where you can work away on your own, get it right, and then push it into production and get it out to the users. So definitely better to run with a separate UAT style environment where you can play around and get it right.
And another small thing here is mobile. So if any of you guys are looking at having mobile devices are in use, so having your process out mobile devices, a couple of things you need to keep in mind. When you look at our form designer, you now have the ability to create separate layouts for your standard FlowForma forms and mobile forms. So you can actually change the look and feel of a mobile form within the form designer. So you can literally have two faces of your process. It's the exact same process, has the exact same functionality, but you can have them looking differently. Because as we all know, mobile devices, you need to keep everything linear, and sometimes it's nice to put a different gloss or a different look to it. Also, keeping in mind, if your mobile forms are going to be offline, sometimes keep in mind that it might not be a bad idea to have even two of the one process. So one process that doesn't rely heavily on lists, etc. in the background, because obviously if you're offline, you won't be able to pull information from databases, but you may still want people to operate. So you may have an offline version of a process, and you can literally export the live one, re-import as a new name, call it for your offline, and change the connections, etc. Would you say that is a good thing to do, Paul?
Yeah, definitely. You can, FlowForma is designed so that your desktop forms will run on mobile devices. Sure it is, but there's often special cases where it's to your advantage to create those separate forms for specific mobile devices. When you know, for example, that the form's always going to be used offline, you can actually build the form specifically for offline use. There's lots of things that you can do there. And the other thing is that mobile devices as well are not as performing as well as the desktop. Your desktop computer is always going to be more powerful than your mobile device. So bear that in mind. From a user experience point of view, you need to try and keep those mobile forms, mobile steps, as simple as you can. So in other words, that you'll never hit a performance bottleneck with your mobile device. So, but there's a number of things that you can do, and CS can advise you on that.
Yeah, exactly. So any of the things here, I know we're sort of we were covering sort of fairly heavy topics, and the reality is it'll boil down to your specific requirements. But the customer success guys have basically come across all of these scenarios and have done a lot with trial and error, making sure the best performance and the best optimization of the process is in place. So with other customers, so you might as well pull upon that knowledge to make the most of your processes. If you come across something you think it's a bit unwieldy, no problem at all. Just go and ask the guys and they'll give you suggestions. I'm just going to finish off this one here and move on to show you we have a process analysis environment. So just bear with me a second. So here it's in this case in Power BI, but we have a Power BI dashboard which facilitates the viewing of your processes just from an overall viewing point of view. So we have this dashboard, and it's a default thing. We can freely give this out to you guys, but basically gives you an analysis. Now you have to bear with the fact that this is a demo environment, so there'll be some bogus information in here, but so it'd be broken into 5 areas. So you've got your processes, the overview, the current open process details. So again, you have views of your open processes. Now there'll be ones here that'll be open. You've got overdue processes, which is quite interesting. So as you can imagine, you would have the ability to check processes sort of by different time zones or by different sort of changing the filters here a lot. And these is pulling from the live information you would have in the background, but simple things even then looking at forms review, for example. Over here, number of forms by start date, and just increase the size of this. So that's a pretty simple looking process. But what I'm going to do up here is go to the next level of the hierarchy, because I know this is date driven. And you can see at the bottom, you've got all the months, the calendar months, but I can see trends here. So obviously I can see that we have the highest outputs are during July and August, some months for these processes. And for example, we have a predominance of onboarding processes here. And also in August, we have, for example, employee maintenance. So what viewing of the data that is being automatically saved within your FlowForma processes, what that's going to allow you to do is actually pinpoint processes that you may have an overload on these. So for example, if we're doing a lot of onboarding during July and August, it may help your decision making in regards to HR staff that may need to, from a holidays point of view, you may want to have HR staff taking holidays in June or September, or you may actually notice bottlenecks in different reports. So you can say certain processes we have a lull there, or we have a blockage there. And with all of these, and I certainly won't be going through all of these different dashboards, but as you can see, we have a lot here. With all of these dashboards in place, it actually gives you the facility to see your performance straight away. So again, with your overdue processes, now, as I say, there's a lot of data here, but you will be able to view processes. Where are we lagging behind? So where are there, as I say, are there bottlenecks? So at the moment, you know, customer request approvals, there could be a bottleneck there. What do you do with that? So what do you do with the fact that something has a bottleneck, or some process has a bottleneck? And Paul will give you an idea what he would feel you should do when you recognize, using the dashboard that we have here, when you recognize the fact that you're having a sort of problem processes, what's the best thing to do? Now, with that in mind, it's very important to realize that processes change and they do have trends. And when you see those trends in action, it's good to act on them. The lucky thing is you have FlowForma that you can act on these things quite quickly. And Paul just stepped through this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. A key thing with FlowForma is it's capturing all that data, all that audit trail, if you like, of all the process activities. So it's easy enough to measure how long things are taking and how long individual steps are taking. So you can jump into a particular step definition. Let me just show you here. So if you're looking in your existing processes, let's pick the old onboarding workflow here. You can simply jump into these your definition here, and you can define estimated durations on everything. So the system automatically captures the actual durations it took to complete a step and to complete a flow and so on. And you can enter in estimates as well. So here on the flow definition, you may not be aware that inside here you can set an estimated duration, and you can alter these durations. So you can say the onboarding flow should take 3 hours or 3 days or however long it is to complete. And then your reporting, the dashboard that Shay showed you, will actually compare the actual time against that estimated duration and show it as a process running on time or running over length. And you could also do that down a step level as well. So it's very easy to make these estimated durations, to record these estimated durations in your process definition. And then the system, as I said, automatically calculates the actuals. And then you can see that the effect of those processes, the performance of those processes, the process efficiency in those dashboards. Now, once you identify through the dashboards that the process is running inefficiently, what can you do about it? Well, you have to do a little bit of digging to find out why it's not working too well. And it may be, for example, that there's a process step that is not running well, that's not running on time, and maybe it doesn't need to be done part of the time. So what we can do here is we can remove the step from the workflow based on a condition. So I can say, for example, the employee manager review doesn't need to be done if the employment category is a certain category. And I can do that by simply using a hide show step business rule. So most of you on the call will be very familiar with this, that I can put it in a condition. I can say if the category is not equal to, if category, for example, that is temporary, the employment contract is temporary, then you know what, I don't need to carry out the employee manager review. So I can go down here and pick a question. Let's pick HR Premier Desk. Let's pick work location. If the work location is equal to, let's say here, Dublin, that's where I am right now, then in that particular case, I don't need to carry out the employee manager review. And that's removing the bottleneck under certain conditions, which is going to make the process more efficient and run faster, which will be evidenced in that reporting. So as you make those changes, you change the new future processes, and you can examine the effect on those future processes to see if they're then running efficiently. The other thing you can do is you can identify that maybe there are several steps in a process that actually could run in parallel, in which case you can set up a thing called a parallel group. So you can define a series of steps, set up the parallel group, and include steps in the parallel group. I'm going to set up another one here to show you very quickly what you can do. So let me just jump to the top define a parallel group. I'm going to call this approvals. This is a very frequent one that we use all the time. So PROVALS. And in this approval step, I'm going to drag it up to the top into this position here. And I'm going to include the employee manager review inside the approvals parallel group. Okay, so I now have an approvals parallel group, and I'm also going to add in a new step. So I want to add in a step called HR approval, and add that into the parallel group as well. So as you can see, setting up and managing parallel groups is really very easy, and it may be a way to, again, make that process more efficient by having multiple people in your organization work on separate steps in parallel, reducing the overall length of the workflow.
Yeah, because
Okay,
it defaults, doesn't it? It defaults to sequential. So when you add in steps,
yes,
it defaults to sequential. So it's important to remember that even when you have the process created, to identify anything that can be done at the same time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know from my past experience as a business analyst that it's sometimes difficult to work out what can be done at the same time, because every organization is different. They have different departments and people in different roles, etc. And it can be often very difficult to work out what can and cannot be done in parallel. But the thing with FlowForma and the whole test and learn approach is that you get something out there, you get it running, and then you monitor it through reporting, and then you amend it and you continuously improve it, so that as your resources in the organization change, you can identify areas which can be improved over time. And it's so easy to go in and make a change to a process, issue it out again, and have people change the behaviors in a positive way. And you can actually measure the results through the reporting that I showed you earlier on.
And one thing just about the reporting, Paul, that I just wanted to emphasize is that dashboard that we showed earlier on is available to FlowForma customers. We have no problem passing it on to you, and it's a Power BI template, and even to pass it on. And if there's suggestions about things that people would like to see in it, maybe would like to change it, not a problem. We have no problem changing the template and reissuing a dashboard, etc. It basically is just to try and improve the visibility of the performance of processes, and to try and help everybody get up to speed very quickly and have another layer of administration or a visibility on how you can administer your processes.
Absolutely. The second topic I'd like to cover is to do with user experience. So we talked there about process efficiency, how you can improve process efficiency. This is something that you should be doing if you're using FlowForma. Okay, it's a no-brainer. You should definitely be able to improve your process and your efficiency over time. Another common thing that we come across with our clients is a smoothing, having a smooth user experience when you're designing forms. So we talked a little bit about this earlier in reference to mobile forms and so on, by making the mobile forms designed specifically for mobile steps, that kind of thing. But there's lots of little things, like accessing data from a SQL server and so on, that can improve that user experience, make it faster, make it smoother. So I've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to show you something very, very briefly. Repeating tables is often an area where people find that they get less than smooth performance. And often that's simply the way the table is designed rather than the actual performance as such from the system. So in this particular example here, what I've done is I've set up a business rule that examines the total line value on this particular purchase order. And if it's more than 100, it basically raises an alert. It says, within limit, exceeds limit. Now, the thing about this is I could do this business rule on the table. So as you typed in the values, it actually recorded in the table, it exceeds limit, exceeds limit. The thing about that is, what if I do that business rule within the table, it causes the table to re-render. What that means is it redisplays the entire table. Now that's fine if it's a small table and you have a small number of rows, But if you had 20 columns in the table, and even if you had 10 rows, that's 200 questions that it's redisplaying. And what you see with the end user's experience is that it's a kind of jittery experience because there's a bit of a gap, a bit of slowness as it recalculates and identifies that the limit's exceeded. And that's because that it's executing the business rules and it's redisplaying the table. So one way around this is to, rather than do it on every time you enter in a value here, have it on a button. So you see down here, I put in a button called Check Line Limits. This is the question type, and I click on that button. And what it will do is it will automatically run through every row of the table, and it will carry out that check. And what it means is that it actually takes the same amount of time, but because it's separated out onto a separate button, from a user experience point of view, it's a better user experience because they see that, oh, well, when I press this button, something's going to happen. It's going to take a few seconds. I get that. That's okay. It's a whole lot better than every time they type a value, it slows down. You have a spinning wheel and, and it's a bit of a wait. So as you're entering data into the table, you have these interruptions every so often. So much better when you put the business rule out on a separate button. Now, I've kind of run out of time, unfortunately, but we're very happy to show you how that's done if you were to contact our customer success department. Okay.
Okay, just from a summary point of view, and I know it's a lot of information, or it's a lot of heavy topics in a very short space of time. The thing to remember is that we do have best practice tips. Very important, and we do have it in certain areas of the product. There are specific areas that we have identified which will help the performance, which will help the view, which will help the user experience of every process that you would have. If you have any queries on it, the customer success guys will be only too happy to help. We also have a process analysis environment that's in Power BI. It's a template that you can import and connect to your database, and we can obviously help you with that and can give you information on your processes, where they sit, current ones that are open, overdue, all that nice area, and that is constantly improving. So that won't just stay in one way, and we will send you, as we have updates, we'll also send you those. And also to keep in mind, we have advisory support available, that if you do want to have a helping hand, please give us a call, drop us an email, and we'll be only too happy to support you.
Thanking Paul and Shay for their content. That half hour absolutely flew by. So I think we just have time for one question, and this has come in from a few people. So Paul, you might be able to answer this for me. So one of the guys here, Mark, and a couple of others have been asking, do they need Power BI to run those dashboards and analysis that you showed earlier?
Okay, so there's two answers. The analysis that Shay showed you was a predefined Power BI report. So yes, that particular one, yes, you need Power BI, but that data is accessible for more than one report tool. So you don't have to have Power BI to access that data. You can even use Excel Power Pivot to access the data, but you'll certainly use other tools as well. So the answer is there's two answers, I guess. The actual dashboard, that specific dashboard that Shay had, was Power BI, but you know what? You can get that data into any other reporting tool that supports an OData feed or can access SQL Server.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Paul. That's really useful. For everyone else who asked questions, we'll respond to you directly post-webinar. And then just before we close up, I just have a few recommended next steps here. So if any of our customers today would like to speak to Paul or Shay about the health of your processes, we'd be happy to do a one-to-one session. So I recommend you email info@flowforma.com and I can get that set up for you. If you haven't spoke to us about our free return to work process pack, I really recommend you get in touch with us on that, and we can give you access to those return to work processes. They're really helpful right now, and you can always visit our COVID-19 Centre at flowforma.com/COVID-19. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Paul and Shay for your great content today, and we'll talk to you all soon.
No problem.
Thanks very much. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.